Long before you were capable of reason, your mind was already learning. Childhood is not simply a phase we pass through. It is the period in which the unconscious is formed. Every tone of voice, every moment of safety or fear, every silence where comfort was needed and absent, was quietly recorded. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious mind is shaped not by what we are taught, but by what we live. As children, we don't analyze experiences, we absorb them. We draw conclusions about who we are and what the world is, without words, without logic, and without choice. If love felt conditional, the psyche learned that acceptance must be earned. If emotions were dismissed, the mind learned to suppress feeling. If chaos was normal, stability later feels unfamiliar. These early impressions become internal rules that guide adult decisions, reactions, and relationships. Most people assume they are living consciously, but much of adult behavior is the repetition of emotional patterns learned before memory fully formed. This is why change feels difficult. You are not fighting habits. You are confronting the architecture of your inner world. And until you recognize that your present reactions are echoes of your earliest experiences, your life will continue to be directed by a past you never chose. Awareness is not blame, it is liberation. What is unresolved in childhood does not vanish with time, it simply changes its form. The psyche seeks completion, and when early emotional experiences are left unprocessed, they reappear later as patterns we mistake for personality. Jung warned that what we fail to make conscious returns to us as fate. A child who learned that love was unpredictable may grow into an adult who anxiously clings or silently withdraws. One who was unseen may become hyper, achieving, hoping visibility will finally bring worth. These are not flaws, they are adaptations that once served a purpose. The problem is not that these strategies exist, but that they operate long after the danger has passed. The adult continues to react as if the original wound is still present. Relationships then become stages where old pain seeks resolution, often recreating the very conditions that caused it. We choose familiar emotional environments, not because they are healthy, but because they are known. Healing begins when you stop identifying with the wound and start observing the pattern. The moment you recognize that a reaction belongs to an earlier version of you, its grip begins to loosen. You are no longer reliving the past. You are understanding it. And understanding is the first act of transformation. Many of the traits we proudly call our personality were not freely chosen. They were forged under pressure. In childhood, the psyche does whatever it must to survive emotionally. If expressing needs led to disappointment, the child learned self-reliance. If conflict felt dangerous, compliance became safety. If attention was scarce, excellence became a shield. These strategies were intelligent responses to limited circumstances, and for a time, they worked. Jung understood this well. The psyche is adaptive long before it is reflective. The difficulty arises when survival behaviors are mistaken for identity. The adult who cannot rest, who struggles to ask for help, or who feels uneasy with closeness may believe this is simply who I am. In reality, these patterns are outdated defenses still guarding a past that no longer exists. What once protected you may now isolate you, exhaust you, or keep you from genuine connection. Growth requires a subtle but profound shift from honoring these traits as necessary chapters to questioning whether they still serve your life today. When survival is no longer required, adaptation becomes limitation. The task is not to destroy these defenses, but to update them with awareness and choice. You are not betraying your past by evolving beyond it. You are completing what it started. No matter how mature, accomplished, or self-controlled we become, a part of us remains anchored in childhood. Jung referred to this as the inner child, not as sentimentality, but as a living psychological reality. This inner presence carries the emotional memory of what was nurtured and what was missing. It does not speak in words, it speaks through longing, reactions, and the quiet sense that something essential is still unmet when basic emotional needs were neglected. The adult often spends a lifetime searching for substitutes. Validation through achievement, safety through control, love through sacrifice. Relationships then carry an unconscious weight. We expect others to repair what was never healed. And when they fail, the disappointment feels deeper than the moment warrants, because it belongs to an earlier time. The work is not to erase the inner child, but to listen to it without allowing it to rule the present. Healing begins when the adult self becomes what the child once needed: stable, attentive, and emotionally present. This is not weakness, it is psychological maturity. When you stop demanding the past from the present, you free both yourself and others. And in that act of inner responsibility, you reclaim a wholeness that was never lost, only waiting to be acknowledged. The way you love, trust, and protect yourself did not begin in adulthood. It was rehearsed in your earliest relationships. Family is the first psychological environment, and from it, we learn what closeness feels like, how conflict is handled, and whether boundaries are respected or violated. Jung observed that we do not choose relationships randomly. We are drawn to dynamics that mirror our internal world. What feels familiar often feels safe, even when it is damaging. If affection was inconsistent, the adult may confuse anxiety with passion. If boundaries were ignored, saying no can feel like betrayal. If emotions were punished, vulnerability becomes threatening. These patterns operate beneath awareness, guiding attraction and behavior while convincing us we are simply following our heart. In truth, we are often following our conditioning. The danger is not repetition itself, but unconscious repetition. When early dynamics are unexamined, we recreate them in friendships, partnerships, and even professional life, hoping, without realizing it, for a different outcome this time. Awareness changes this cycle. When you understand why a dynamic feels magnetic, you gain the power to choose differently. The moment you stop confusing familiarity with truth, you open the door to relationships that support growth rather than reenact pain. At a certain point, growth demands responsibility, not for what happened, but for what continues because it remains unconscious. Jung's insight was uncompromising until you make the unconscious conscious. It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Awareness is the moment the past loosens its grip, not because it disappears, but because it is finally seen clearly. Most people wait for life to change before they change. But psychological maturity moves in the opposite direction. When you observe your reactions without justification, when you question emotional impulses instead of obeying them, You interrupt patterns that may be decades old. This is not repression, it is integration. You are no longer fighting the past. You are placing it where it belongs. Awareness creates choice, and choice restores authorship. You begin to respond rather than react, to decide rather than repeat. This is where childhood stops being a hidden ruler and becomes a source of insight. The goal was never to rewrite your story, but to understand it deeply enough that it no longer writes you. The moment you stop living on psychological autopilot, your life becomes deliberate. And that is the true beginning of freedom.